Leonard fell. No warning, no stumble. His body simply gave out in the middle of West Madison Street sidewalk in Chicago, as if his heart had forgotten to beat. The briefcase slipped from his right hand. The umbrella dropped over his left arm. His head hit the ground with a muffled, dry thud, barely noticeable to those walking by in a hurry. No one stopped. A group of 4 teenagers passed by. One of them laughed, thinking it was a drunk. A man in a charcoal blazer swerved without looking. A woman pushed her baby stroller harder and pretended not to see. Leonard Byrne, 73 years old, father of 3, grandfather of 6, retired from the insurance sector, lay sprawled on the concrete, pale-faced, eyes lost in the grey sky. The cold April wind danced across his sweaty forehead. The world around kept moving as if he didn't exist. A drop of saliva slipped from the corner of his mouth. His fingers trembled. His breathing was short, broken, irregular. 14 people passed by in the first 3 minutes. One of them even bent down slightly, but quickly changed their mind, checked their phone, and walked on. Leonard moved his lips, tried to ask for help. No sound came out. The pain in his chest was a crushing weight, like someone had pushed a stone onto him. A kind of pain you can't scream from, because there's no air. And still, nothing. Just the sound of honking footsteps, the city swallowing yet another silent scene of neglect. Then from across the street, someone stopped. If this story is touching you in any way, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Small, barefoot, with torn pants and an alert gaze, Miles was watching. He stood next to a newsstand, sucking on a candy he'd taken from the counter when the vendor wasn't looking. His eyes looked like they'd seen too much for someone only 12. Miles ran across the street, dodging a taxi and a black SUV. He got close to the body, crouched down. The man was breathing, a rough, irregular sound. "Sir?" he whispered. He touched the old man's shoulder, who flinched slightly. Miles looked around. No one approached. The street moved as usual. People came, looked, and ignored. He got on his knees. "Somebody help here!" he shouted. Nothing. He pulled Leonard's phone from his jacket pocket. Locked. Passcode screen. Tried a few obvious combinations. Nothing. Sweat dripped from his forehead. Tried again. Nothing. Damn. Miles sprang to his feet and ran to a hot dog stand on the corner. "Mister, got a phone?" The vendor shook his head without even lifting his eyes. Miles kicked the ground, spun on his heel, and ran in another direction. 50 meters away, an ambulance was stopped at a red light, headlights on, siren off. Miles bolted, started yelling before he even got there. "Hey, help! A man collapsed! He's not well!" He banged on the side of the ambulance. One of the paramedics stepped down slowly, surprised. "What?" "There on the sidewalk, an old man. He fell and he's bad, please." The paramedic looked where the boy pointed. Something in his voice convinced him. He yelled to the driver. The ambulance turned and sped toward the location. Leonard was still on the ground. Miles ran alongside the vehicle. When it stopped, he got there first, pointed urgently. "He's here! Quick!" 2 paramedics got out. The older one, in a navy blue vest with tied-back hair, knelt by the old man and began procedures: blood pressure, pulse, breathing. "Did you see what happened?" she asked without taking her eyes off the patient. "I just saw him on the ground. Tried to call for help, but no one stopped." She nodded but didn't reply. Quickly, she hooked up oxygen, spoke something into the radio, and began prepping the stretcher. Leonard murmured a hoarse sound. Miles approached again, picked up the fallen briefcase and placed it on the stretcher next to the body. "Are you family?" asked the younger paramedic. "I'm nobody. I just saw and stopped." The sincerity cut through the air. The man looked up at Miles for a second longer than necessary. "You did the right thing, kid." The ambulance pulled away minutes later. Miles stood there, hands dirty, shirt stained, watching until the red lights disappeared around the corner. Then a police officer appeared out of nowhere. "Hey, were you the one who called?" Miles nodded. "What's your name?" "Miles." "Miles what?" "Just Miles." The officer sized up the boy. Short, thin, dirty, brown eyes lacking a child's sparkle, a shoelaceless sneaker. The question slipped out without control. "Where do you live?" Miles pointed with his chin in a vague direction. "Over there. Sometimes. Depends. Got any family?" Silence. The officer scratched his chin. "You hungry?" Miles hesitated, then nodded almost imperceptibly. They walked to a diner on the corner. Along the way, no one noticed them. The city had already returned to its normal rhythm. Leonard was just another man who fell. Miles was just another boy no one saw. But that late afternoon, for a brief moment, the world had a witness, a child who didn't look away. Miles chewed the egg sandwich slowly, the one the officer had bought for him. They were sitting on a concrete bench in front of an empty parking lot. The sun was hiding behind the clouds, painting the sky a dirty orange. The officer, named Cole Armstrong, looked at the boy with a mix of curiosity and concern. "How old are you?" he asked. 12. "You always stay around here?" Miles nodded with a full mouth. "And at night?" "Depends. Sometimes at the 17th shelter. But it gets full. Slept yesterday in an old van near the station." "And your parents?" The boy shrugged, still chewing. Cole crossed his arms and watched the street. The radio on his shoulder whispered a call, but he ignored it. What that boy had done wasn't common. Not in this city. Not at that age. "That took courage, Miles," he said. "A lot of grown-ups would have walked away." "He looked like my grandpa." Cole raised an eyebrow. "You remember him?" Miles wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Grandpa Walter died when I was 8. He wore the same kind of jacket." Silence. "Have you ever thought of going to a permanent shelter? Some kind of support center?" "Yeah, stayed in 3. In one, a guy stole my shoes. In another, I punched a monitor who tried to take my food." Cole let out a contained sigh. They were in the heart of one of the richest cities in the country, and still, a 12-year-old kid had to chase ambulances to save an old man while sleeping in old vans. "You go to school?" "Used to. Long time ago." "So, what do you do all day?" Miles shrugged. "I watch, I listen, I help when I can." The sincerity was disarming. Cole scratched his chin and stood up. "Wait here a minute." He walked to the patrol car a few meters away, spoke into the radio, returned with a notepad and pen. "I'm gonna write down your full name. Do you remember it?" "Miles Rowan Cooper." "Rowan? That's different." "It was my dad's." "Where is he?" Miles stared at the ground. Silence. Cole stopped writing. "It's okay. You don't have to say." They both stayed quiet for a few seconds. Miles finished the sandwich, looked up at the sky. The first stars began to pierce through the orange veil of dusk. "That man, will he be okay?" "Apparently, yes. They took him to County General. He's stable." Miles nodded, satisfied, then asked, "Did he have family?" "Yes. His wife called, desperate. She was waiting for him to come back from the pharmacy. Looks like he always left at the same time." "And nobody helped him?" "No. Just you." Ooh, the silence that followed was long. Cars passed by. A dog barked in the distance. The city felt as far away as the clouds over the buildings. "Can I see him?" Miles asked suddenly. Cole looked at him. "Maybe. I can try. But only if he wants to." "I don't want anything. Just to see him." "All right, let's do this. Tomorrow morning I'll come by. If you're around, we'll try to visit." Miles nodded. His gaze was steady, direct, asking for nothing. Cole extended his hand for a shake. Miles hesitated, then returned it. Small, cold, calloused hands. "You're different, kid. Or maybe I'm just someone who saw." Cole gave a faint smile and climbed into the patrol car. Miles stayed in the same spot, sitting on the bench. When the car's lights vanished around the corner, he leaned back and closed his eyes. The next morning, Cole kept his word. He arrived at 9 a.m. and Miles was already on the corner. Same clothes, but his face had a strange glow, almost like expectation. On the way to the hospital, Cole explained that Leonard was conscious but still under observation. His wife, Helen, was with him. Miles nodded silently, looking out the window as if seeing the city for the first time. In room 214, Leonard lay in bed. an oxygen tube in his nose and a heart monitor nearby. His eyes opened when Cole entered. "Remember him?" Cole asked, gesturing to Miles. Leonard furrowed his brow, studied the boy. A faint smile formed at the corner of his mouth. "He's the boy who stopped." "That's right. Miles, he wanted to know if you were okay." Helen, a woman with neatly combed white hair and thick glasses, rose from the chair beside the bed. Her eyes welled up. "You were the one who called for help." Miles nodded. "No one was doing anything. I saw and I don't know. Thought I could try." She stepped closer, touched his shoulder. Her hands trembled. "Thank you. You saved my husband." Miles bit his lower lip. Didn't know what to do with that kind of gratitude. "I just saw someone on the ground." "Well, I'm glad you were looking." Leonard raised his hand with effort. "May I?" Miles stepped closer, shook the old man's hand. Weak, but firm. "Do you have a name, boy?" Leonard asked, voice still raspy. Miles Rowan Cooper." Leonard smiled. "You remind me of my eldest grandson. He's observant too, but I don't think he'd have done what you did. Maybe he wouldn't have seen it." Helen let out an emotional chuckle. "Maybe, but you did." Cole watched in silence from the doorway. Something about that scene defied explanation through reports. Two lives that should never have crossed were there, connected by a moment that wasn't supposed to happen, but did. "Do you want anything?" Helen asked. "A snack? Some clean clothes?" Miles shook his head. "Just wanted to know if he was okay. That's all. And after that, where will you go?" The boy didn't answer. Leonard coughed lightly. Helen looked at Cole. "He doesn't have a home." Cole shook his head. "No school either. No nearby family as far as I know." Helen fell silent, then turned back to Miles. "Would you mind coming back tomorrow, bringing your things? We could talk." Miles frowned. "For what?" "Because sometimes what begins as a gesture turns into something bigger." Miles said nothing, but for the first time in a long while, his face seemed lighter, as if a weight had slipped off his shoulders. They left the hospital in silence. Cole dropped Miles off at the same corner. Before closing the car door, the boy looked back. "Tomorrow at 9? I'll be here, Miles." "All right then." The car drove away. Miles stood still, looking at the sky. The clouds were lighter. It was hard to explain, but that day he didn't feel invisible anymore. Miles arrived precisely at 9. There was no watch on his wrist, but he seemed guided by something more precise: hope. He wore the same clothes as the day before, with a hooded sweatshirt now covering his head, and carried a plastic bag with his belongings. Half a dozen crumpled items, a pair of socks, a broken toothbrush, and a child-sized t-shirt with a faded Bulls logo. Cole was waiting inside the patrol car parked across the street. When he saw Miles, he got out with a wave. "Ready to go back there?" Miles nodded. He climbed into the passenger seat with the care of someone not used to cars without jammed doors. He didn't speak during the ride. He watched the headlights, the lane markings, the faces at the stoplights. Everything seemed more colorful, more alive. At the hospital, Helen was waiting for them at the entrance, her expression wavering between resolve and nervousness. She held a folder in one hand and a small black backpack at her side. "Hi, Miles," she said with a smile. "Thank you for coming." He gave a slight, wary nod. "Is Mr. Leonard okay?" "Yes, he's stable, sleeping now. Had a good night." "That's good." Helen looked at Cole, then back at the boy. "Did you think about what we talked about yesterday?" Miles fidgeted with his left hand, working the pocket of his sweatshirt in and out. "I don't know. I just want to talk. No promises, okay?" He nodded. They went up together to the 3rd floor of the hospital, but entered a side room away from where Leonard was resting. There was a sofa, 2 chairs, a corner table with a coffee maker and cookies in a jar. A social worker was waiting for them, clipboard in hand and a patient expression. His name was Brian. The conversation was long. They talked about where Miles slept, how he got food, if he had any close relatives, if he remembered any former addresses. The boy answered in short phrases, some truths. Others just silences that spoke louder than words. Brian asked questions gently, taking notes slowly. Helen didn't say much, but watched everything. At the end of the conversation, she leaned forward. "Leonard and I talked," she said. "We have a spare room. It's small, but there's space for a bed, a wardrobe, and maybe a new life if you want." Miles froze. "A room? At our house in Hyde Park, near the lake. It's calm, full of trees." "Why?" Helen smiled, her eyes misting. "Because you saw my husband on the ground. And not only saw, you stopped. The whole city passed by him, but you didn't. And maybe now it's our turn to stop for you." Miles didn't answer. He stared at the floor for a long time. Then he looked up. "Could it just be for a while?" "Yes, as long as you want. No strings, Miles, just a chance." The silence that followed was thick. Brian flipped through his papers calmly, unhurried. Cole, leaning against the door, watched with his arms crossed. The boy's heart seemed to be beating in his ears. Part of him wanted to run, another wanted to say yes, loud and clear. "I don't know how to live in a house," Miles whispered. "We'll teach you," Helen replied. Hours later, with papers filled out, initial permissions signed, and the black backpack in hand, Miles got into a rideshare car with Helen. Cole watched until the vehicle disappeared into the traffic of South Michigan Avenue. Only then did he truly smile. Hyde Park was a neighborhood of wide, quiet streets. Tall trees swayed their branches in the spring wind. The car stopped in front of a single-story red brick house with a small garden and an American flag on the porch. Helen opened the door. Miles hesitated at the gate, took a deep breath, and stepped in. The room was indeed small. It had a light wood bed, clean sheets and an overly fluffy pillow, a blue lamp on the nightstand, a shelf with a few books, and a window facing the backyard where a lemon tree stood. Miles dropped the bag on the floor and stood there. Didn't sit, didn't touch anything. Helen appeared at the door. "If you want to change, there's a towel in the bathroom. Your wardrobe's empty, but we'll sort it out tomorrow." Miles nodded. Still didn't move. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "I don't know what to do with silence." Helen smiled. "You'll get used to it. At first it's scary, then it becomes peace." That night, Miles lay on the bed. At first, he couldn't sleep. The sheet smelled too much like detergent. The mattress was too soft. The walls didn't creak, and there were no sirens or horns, just the sound of wind rustling through the lemon tree leaves. It was strange, almost uncomfortable, but little by little, his eyes grew heavy. He dreamed of Leonard standing, waving at him from the sidewalk. He was smiling, and behind him, like a protective shadow, the brick house stood with the door ajar and the scent of fresh bread in the air. The next morning, Miles woke to the sound of dishes clinking softly in the kitchen. The sky was blue, and the open windows let in the fresh smell of cut grass. He came downstairs slowly. Helen sat at the table reading a newspaper. On the table were pancakes, a pitcher of juice, and 2 plates. "Sleep well?" Miles nodded. "Hungry?" He sat down, ate slowly, as if not wanting to ruin the moment. Then Helen handed him a pamphlet. "Neighborhood public school. Starts at 8. We can go there together today if you want." Miles looked at the paper. The school was big, with wide windows and a huge court. It looked like something out of TV. "What if they ask about me?" "We answer with the truth, that I lived on the street, that now you live here, and the rest is part of what made you who you are." Miles swallowed hard, looked at the plate, then at Helen. "Don't you think this is all too fast?" "Maybe, but sometimes life moves fast, and we need to be ready to embrace what comes." He thought for a few seconds. "Then let's go." Helen smiled. They left the house together, and for the first time, Miles crossed a street carrying a backpack that wasn't plastic, without needing to run from anyone, and without fear of being ignored. Now he had an address, a room, a name someone would remember, and it all began because he saw and didn't walk away. In his first week at the new school, Miles sat in the back of the classroom, quiet, shoulders hunched, eyes alert. It was Roosevelt Middle, a grey three-story building with long windows and noisy hallways. Uniforms weren't required, but Helen insisted he wear clean clothes and new sneakers. Still, he felt out of place, like an intruder. "You're the ambulance kid, right?" a classmate asked during recess. Miles looked up. A shorter boy, buzz-cut hair, blue backpack. "What? I saw it on CBS. A street kid who saved an old man downtown. That was you, wasn't it?" Miles hesitated, then nodded without smiling. That same day, the principal called him to the office. Reporter Dana Morales from NBC5 wanted to speak with him. A security camera video had gone viral. It showed Leonard collapsing and dozens of people walking past. Then, a small boy appeared, shouting, running after an ambulance. Miles refused. "I don't want to give an interview, but people need to hear your story," Dana said gently. "It's inspiring. I didn't do it for that." Helen respected his decision, but the story was already out. The video was everywhere in the city. Comments flooded the posts. "There's still hope for the world. This boy is worth more than most politicians." A hoodie-wearing angel. When Helen showed him a post with over 500,000 likes, Miles simply said, "They weren't there." The school noticed too. Teachers began greeting him more enthusiastically. In the cafeteria, he got a regular seat. And for the first time, Miles raised his hand in a science class. That same day, he found a handwritten note inside his backpack. "You saw when no one else did. That can't be taught. That's something you are." No signature, just neat, rounded handwriting. In the second week, Leonard was discharged. Miles and Helen picked him up from the hospital. The old man now used a cane and seemed more fragile, but his gaze was more vivid. "Can't believe I'm alive thanks to a kid who didn't even have a place to sleep," he said, as Helen wheeled him to the car. "I can," she replied. "It's always the invisible ones who see best." In the back seat, Miles stayed silent. Leonard looked at him through the rearview mirror. "Ready to put up with me every day now?" "Only if you don't snore too loud." Leonard laughed, a weak but genuine laugh, and with it something shifted. In the third week, Helen organized a dinner. She invited 2 neighbors and the wife of one of Leonard's former colleagues. During the conversation, one of them asked, "And you, Miles, what do you want to be when you grow up?" He stayed quiet. It wasn't a question he was used to hearing. "Doctor? Firefighter? Maybe a paramedic," he answered after a moment. "Feels right to help someone on the ground." The guest smiled. Helen gently squeezed Leonard's hand under the table. In the 4th week, a reporter from the Chicago Tribune published a story titled "The Boy Who Stopped Time." It didn't use Miles's full name by the family's request, but it detailed what had happened that afternoon. The article went even more viral than the video. One morning after school, Miles found a woman waiting for him. Well-dressed, clipboard and envelope in hand. "You're Miles?" He nodded cautiously. "I'm with the Monroe Foundation. We work with at-risk youth. We read about you. We'd like to offer you a full scholarship for the summer program. Classes, sports, creative development, you choose, and you can bring someone with you if you'd like." Helen and Leonard sat in silence reading the pamphlet at home. "There's no cost," Helen said. "They're funded by donations." "Sounds good," Leonard said, scratching his chin. "Also sounds like a lot." Miles studied the paper. "But I don't even know if I'll still be here by then." Helen looked at him surprised. "What do you mean?" "I don't know." "What if you guys change your minds? What if you get tired of me?" Leonard leaned forward in his chair. "Listen here, kid, I almost died. And if there's one thing I've understood since that day, it's that someone who shows up at your worst moment isn't someone you throw away later." Miles looked away. "But I'm weird. I don't know things. I ask too many questions, and I talk to myself sometimes. That just makes you human." Helen stood up, picked up the pamphlet, and handed it back to him. "We're not going anywhere, but you are if you want to. This decision is yours." The next morning, Miles signed the form. Weeks turned into months. Miles began to smile more, learned to ride a bike with Leonard. Helen taught him how to make lasagna. At school, he got the highest grade in the class on an essay. The topic was, "The person I admire most." He wrote about Leonard. At the end of the text, he wrote, "He fell because his heart failed, but he got up because he saw that someone still cares." The essay was read aloud at the school assembly. Miles received a standing ovation. Blushing, he didn't know what to do with his hands, but inside his chest, something pulsed differently. The city no longer ignored him. He now existed, and more importantly, he was seen. Summer arrived, bringing a new scent to the house. Helen filled the garden with lavender and mint. Leonard spent the afternoons with the radio, playing next to his rocking chair, and Miles, now with shorter hair and a collection of new t-shirts, was getting ready for the Monroe Foundation's summer program. On the morning of the first day, he woke up before the alarm. He put on his favorite cargo pants, grabbed a cereal bar from the kitchen, and stood by the front door, watching the sun rise over the quiet houses. Helen appeared with his backpack already packed and a note clipped to the zipper. "Open it only when you get there," she said with a smile. Leonard came next, still in pajamas and slippers. "Don't forget to let us know if you need more socks," he said, "and try not to scare the instructors with those philosophical questions of yours." "I'm only bringing the practical ones today," Miles replied, smiling. Helen drove him to the meeting point. When he got out of the car, he looked back more than once, as if trying to freeze the moment. She waved from the driver's seat. He disappeared into the crowd of other kids. Hours later, at the foundation headquarters, Miles opened the note. "It's not about where you start. It's about who you choose to be when no one's watching. We love you, Helen and Leonard." He folded the paper carefully, tucked it into the front pocket of his backpack, and stared at the grass around him. Other kids were running, laughing, yelling. He watched them with the calm of someone who knows what it means to be alone. But now, it was different. He wasn't trying to prove he existed. He already knew that. In the second week of the program, he was assigned to the video production group. The theme, Impact in Your Community. An instructor asked, "Has anyone here ever experienced something that changed their life?" Miles raised his hand for the first time without hesitation. "I changed mine, and someone else's too." He told the story without forced emotion. No embellishments, just the facts. An old man's fall, the silence of others, the choice to stop, the sprint after the ambulance, the new home, the hot meal, the first hug in years. The team decided that would be the group's main documentary. Weeks later, the short film was shown to 100 people. In the video, Miles wore a navy blue hoodie looking directly into the camera. "That day I saw someone on the ground. I could have acted like I didn't, like everyone else, but something inside me didn't let me. I ran, I shouted, and in the end, I didn't just save him, I saved myself too, because now I know I'm seen. And when someone really sees you, everything changes." At the end of the screening, silence, then applause, a standing ovation. Again. But this time he didn't blush, didn't shrink back. He smiled. On the way home, Helen was waiting at the door with 2 glasses of iced tea. "How was it?" "It was, big." She handed him a glass. They sat on the porch. "They're uploading the video to the Foundation's channel next week," she said. "A lot of people might see it. You ready for that?" Miles looked at her, then at the street, then at the sky. "I think so." The next morning, the doorbell rang. Helen opened it. A well-dressed man with a leather briefcase and a pin on his blazer introduced himself. "I'm Ben Harris from the Department of Human Development. I saw Miles's video. We're launching a pilot program with youth mentors in underserved communities. We'd like him to be our spokesperson." Helen called Miles. He listened to the proposal in silence. When Ben finished, Miles simply asked, "Will this help someone?" "It will." "Then show me where to sign." The following month, Miles visited schools, community centers, and support groups. He told his story without drama. He wasn't a victim. He was a turning point. Then, at an event in Bronzeville, an elderly woman with a cane approached him after the talk. "You're the boy from the video, right?" "I am. My husband collapsed in the street in February. No one helped. He died. When I saw your story, I cried, but I also felt peace. Because I thought, if someone like you exists, then maybe my husband wasn't forgotten for nothing." Miles touched her hand. She gripped his firmly. "Thank you for reminding the world what really matters." On the way home, he told Helen and Leonard. The old man sat in silence for a while. Then he said, "Sometimes a fall shows who's willing to reach out, and sometimes the one who falls is just the start of what the world needed to see." Months later, Miles turned 13. The house was filled with classmates, teachers, foundation staff, even the Tribune reporter. When it was time to sing happy birthday, he blew out the candles and made only one wish: that no one ever has to scream for help and be ignored. That night, Helen found him sitting in the backyard, looking at the stars. "What are you thinking about?" "About how things would have been if I'd walked past that day." She sat beside him. "But you didn't." "No. Why not?" he thought. The breeze passed gently through the lemon tree's branches. Because when you've been on the ground, you learn to recognize who's there. And when that happens, you stop, even if the whole world is moving. Helen smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for stopping. Thank you for letting me stay." Inside, Leonard was listening to music on the old radio. The song played low, like a whisper. Outside, Miles closed his eyes. Now, he knew what it meant to be seen. And more than that, he knew what it meant to hold the door open so others could be found too.